being used for face mask export. Number 3, Chinese firms are eyeing distressed business assets around the world. We'll correct those graphics. I apologize for that. We'll put the correct ones on screen in just a moment. India Today's Gaurav Sawant and Geeta Mohan are with me live. Gaurav, is it any exaggeration? You know, the world is angry with China right now. China says this is racial bias, etc., which is complete hogwash. But if you look at the facts on the ground, isn't it true, at the very least, Gaurav, that China is profiting from what's going on?
Oh, absolutely, Shiv. And for the world, it's a double whammy. First, the coronavirus, China's biggest sin, covering up. When they should have gone out and told the entire world, China and the World Health Organization stand accused of a massive cover-up and in a way trying to lull the world into a false sense of complacency. When even the WHO went to the extent of saying that there is no evidence of human-to-human transmission when there directly was, and Taiwan had sensitized the world according to multiple reports. And Taiwan and Vietnam were two countries that took preventive measures, and they've been able to contain the situation. But look at how Europe is suffering, look at how America is suffering, and look at how Spain, the first country to say that 640,000 test kits that they had ordered from China, the first lot of 9,000 test kits, rapid test kits, they're supposed to have 80% accuracy. Shiv, they have less than 30% accuracy, and it's not just Spain alone. The Czech Republic, they've complained about this. Ukraine has complained. Turkey has complained. Instead of 80% accuracy, 70% accuracy, these rapid test kits are giving less than 30% accuracy. So this is where China is not only misleading the world with the pandemic, it's now selling faulty test kits. And then when caught out, they're saying that these test kits were bought off the shelf from companies that were not authorized to sell. So, there are layers and layers, and Spain is angry, Europe is angry, the United States is angry. India, fortunately, locked out, but we're still not out of the woods, Shiv. A lot still needs to be done to ensure that India is able to flatten the graph as China tries to profit from this.
Geeta, these are not some small fry countries that are at the receiving end of China's insidious ways. Countries like Spain, the Czech Republic, the United Kingdom, even one of China's allies, Turkey, they're all suffering at the hands of this defective equipment, and China clearly profiteering from this crisis. Is India insulated? Please tell me India is insulated from what China is trying to do.
Quite insulated, but not completely, Shiv. Today we had a press release from the Chinese embassy in New Delhi that the first medical equipments have arrived, first batch of medical equipments have arrived, being funded by Alibaba Foundation and being given to NGOs over here. We do not know whether that includes testing kits, because it certainly can't. There are registered testing units and laboratories that are involved in the Indian administration, or in India, so to say. But in terms of other medical equipment, there is a first batch that has arrived. We again will have to wait and see what that equipments are really going to help in the COVID, in battling COVID-19. But looking at the larger picture over here, Chinese government will have to be held accountable, Shiv. We've seen them arm twist the WHO into delaying even the announcement of COVID-19 as a pandemic. We've seen them arm twist Italy into continuing flight operations after the world over, including India, the countries had stopped their flight operations with China. And look at the kind of state of affairs that Italy has landed itself in. Europe is absolutely under the economic grasp of China, and one can see that in the kind of arm twisting that China has done, not just there, but also at the United Nations Security Council and at the United Nations General Assembly, where we still wait for a proper discussion on COVID-19 and accountability pinned down on the Chinese administration. No discussion yet, only proposals.
Thank you very much, Geeta and Gaurav. Those were the 5 ways. I wanted to once again put out those graphics so all of our viewers know, and you have the facts of the 5 ways in which China is actually profiting from the world crisis as we know it right now. Chinese clothing units are now being used for face masks. Chinese firms are eyeing distressed business assets globally. Chinese firms are making ventilators for export. That is the kind of blood-sucking culture China has been reduced to. First create the crisis and then profit from the world's attempts to fight that crisis. An incredible, insidious nation is now a threat to the world. And I'm not exaggerating. This has nothing to do with race. We're all a part of Asia, but this is what China has brought the world to. A 57-year-old female shrimp seller in China's Wuhan city, the epicenter, the originating point of the coronavirus pandemic, has been identified as one of the first victims of this contagious virus. Here's how it all began in a wet seafood market in Wuhan.
This is where it began. That much the world is reasonably sure of. The Huanan seafood wet market in Wuhan, ground zero of coronavirus pandemic. But who was the first human to be infected? Well, it turns out the world may finally know who patient zero is. With over 31,000 deaths and counting, and the number of cases steadily marching towards 1 million, the numbers are mind-numbing. But finally, it's down to one, and it's here in this Chinese seafood market. Reports suggest that patient zero has been identified as Wei Guixian, who is a 57-year-old seller of shrimp at the Huanan seafood market in Wuhan. As epidemiologists do a deep dive into how things exploded from patient zero, first, let's walk you through what's known of the shrimp seller's deadly timeline. After catching what she thought was a cold on December 10 last year, patient zero visited a clinic believing she had a common flu. With symptoms worsening, she visited the Wuhan Union Hospital on December 16, where she was diagnosed. However, she was only quarantined at the end of the month. Thankfully, after a month-long treatment, she recovered in January. The Wuhan woman believes she may have been infected after sharing toilets at the seafood market with meat sellers. While she is being regarded as patient zero, there is no conclusive evidence that she may have been the first to be infected. The first case was detected in the beginning of December. Wei Guixian was among the first 27 patients to test positive for COVID-19 and one of the 24 from Huanan market. Probably most significantly, patient zero has a damning comment to make on the country's rulers in Beijing. She believes if the government had acted sooner, there would have been fewer deaths. Bureau Report, India Today.
The deadly coronavirus has paralyzed the world, with major nations going under complete lockdown. India has shut nearly wholly, barring regulated essential services in the wake of the spread of COVID-19. But there is a need to discuss the origins of this crisis. We told you about patient zero, but the wet markets of Wuhan, and there are many across China. Watch this report on why China's obsession with seafood, the unregulated use of wet markets, could be the genesis of this crisis.
These visuals speak volumes about the quality of meat that is being consumed locally within China. There have been massive sparring between China and the US over the origin of the virus.
I would like to begin by announcing some important developments in our war against the Chinese virus. We'll be invoking the Defense Production Act just in case we need it. In other words, I think you all know what it is.
Some reports suggest that the infection spread either from a bat or a pangolin. But when it comes to the place of origin, there is much clarity. The Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention confirmed, after successfully isolating the novel coronavirus, that it came from wildlife animals sold in the market in downtown Hankou of Wuhan City.
通通都是人类和野生动物的不当接触造成的。
This is not food, but a health hazard, violating all standards and norms. This is not the first time that China is the epicenter of another coronavirus. SARS also spread from traders of wildlife in Guangdong, China. The Hankou wet market has a section that sells exotic animals and birds as well, those that are not approved by the government. But China has been rather lenient on these matters. The wet market had a section selling some 120 wildlife animals across 75 species. While the mistreatment is not a secret, the growing subculture of wildlife eating has also become a status symbol.
It's not really the eating of wildlife, it's the hunting, the capture, and killing them and cutting them up, and getting exposed to the blood and the feces and urine. That's where these viruses get across.
Videos of people eating bats, rodents, snakes, and other creatures can be found in abundance online. But China hardly enforced any of the laws, and wildlife trading continued unabated. Until COVID-19 hit the South Asian giant, crippling its entire system. On January 26th, Beijing aimed to suspend trade after a notice by the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Ministry, the State Administration for Market Regulation, and the State Forestry. But only until the epidemic is over, which might not be enough. Wildlife trade has had devastating impact on animals, not just locally found in China, but also those brought in or smuggled in from other countries. Reports indicate that before the Huanan market closed, vendors there sold processed meat and live consumable animals, including chickens, donkeys, sheep, pigs, camels, foxes, badgers, bamboo rats, and hedgehogs, as well as reptiles like snakes. Pangolins have been almost wiped out. Snakes are rarely seen in much of South China. Shockingly, according to some reports, the Chinese government recommended using Tanri Quing, an injection containing bear bile, to treat severe and critical COVID-19 cases, leading to spike in killing of bears. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If China does not mend its ways, then the world would have to face the consequences. China has to make the difficult choice of changing its ways of life and prioritize public health and safety. Else, it will be a long way off from becoming a superpower.
Experts believe the outbreak of both coronavirus and SARS started in Chinese wet markets. My colleague Geeta Mohan spoke with Dr. Peter J. Lee, China policy specialist, on what exactly happens inside these infamous wet markets where COVID-19 is likely to have been born.
If you could begin by explaining to us what are these wet markets of Hankou in Wuhan that has been the epicenter of the outbreak?
The Hankou market in Wuhan is a typical marketplace where you can get almost everything from fresh vegetable to meat, pork, beef, mutton, and seafood. There is also a section where you can get wildlife animals such as snakes, city cats, and other wildlife animals of about 75 species. But typically people don't go there. So the wildlife animals are sold to small restaurants, I believe. So that's why that's a typical, marketplace.
What are the kind of meats that we can really see people sell at the Wuhan market, which has been the epicenter? Given the fact that there are a lot of reports being very critical of how China has handled wildlife, its policies with regards to the meat coming from across the globe, various kinds of species being slaughtered and sold in the Hankou market. So, can you just explain to us what are the kind of animals that are sold in this market?
In China, there is not a clear demarcation as to what can be sold and what cannot be sold. Theoretically, the Chinese government allowed the breeding and marketing of 54 wildlife animals captively bred, but we see a large number of animals wild caught, especially animals which are state protected species. So China's wildlife market is beyond the reach of Chinese laws. There is a complete lawlessness there. So I would say it is a line of business that the Chinese government should crack down upon.
Professor Lee, you speak of many kinds of wildlife. Now, could you just tell us exactly what the rules and regulations and laws of China has been when it comes to trading in wildlife?
China has banned wildlife consumption and wildlife trade, but I would say this is not enough, even though the decision to ban wildlife trade and consumption is the most commendable step taken by the Chinese government. And we hope that the ban will become a permanent policy when China revises its wildlife protection law.
Coverage of the coronavirus crisis continues non-stop. It's our biggest story here on India Today. Thanks for watching. For further news and updates, remember, you can always log on to indiatoday.in and also download the India Today app. Please remember to stay home and stay safe.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.